You can do it, but you can't do it alone. And my theory is that you just have to be the bridge. You have to take them just as far as the point where they can meet other native speakers and go farther with them. Hi everyone, welcome to Live Your Language, tips and inspiration for your multilingual life. I'm Stephanie, a PhD student in second language acquisition and a mother to two children that I'm raising to be multilingual in French, my non-native language, and in Spanish. In this video, I'm going to talk all about our experience with Saturday school, and also I'm going to talk about why we chose to leave Saturday school. So be sure to stay tuned until the very end where I talk all about that decision. These are schools that are taught in the minority language in a majority context. People send their kids to these schools on Saturdays, usually on weekends, so that they'll have exposure to other native speakers in this language and hopefully positive experiences too. So we are lucky in that about 40 minutes away or so for us, we have a really big French hub in our state. I just feel super fortunate because I know that for a lot of you, that is not the case. First, I want to talk about why we decided to pursue Saturday school in the first place. I'm the only person in my household who speaks French. For the longest time, I was the only person speaking French in my child's life, in my children's life. I remember when I asked my professor way back when I was first pregnant, can I raise my child bilingually in a non-native language? And she said, yes, you can, but you cannot do it alone. You have to have other speakers, other native speakers to help you out. With the pandemic and all, I just found myself basically 2 or 3 years in being the only source of French for these two children. So when I learned of this opportunity, I jumped at it and I couldn't wait to sign him up. French is my non-native language, but for him, it's his native language. And I really love seeing the way he lights up when somebody speaks French. I truly think that French is his heart language, even though it's not my native language. And I know that will eventually change as English becomes his dominant language. Nevertheless, I really wanted him to have those experiences in that language that speaks directly to his heart. We know from research that varied language input really matters. And I was hoping that Saturday school would provide this for him. And lastly, he was getting older and really sick of being stuck in the house all the time with me and our newborn baby, and he just really needed to be out and having fun with other kids his age. So I was hoping that by joining Saturday school and being in a classroom with other kids his age, he would grow socially and do so in French. When I got out of the car, I got the baby in the stroller, I got his backpack, his coat, everything for my older son, and we started walking and we heard French everywhere. You know, a mom speaking French to her child over here, parents speaking with their children over here in French. And even when, you know, I dropped something or I tripped something and I ran into somebody by accident, they would say, oh, pardon, in French. Yeah, they would excuse themselves in French. Even when in our rush to get to class on time, we were lost, of course, my son tripped and skinned his knee and it started bleeding, and a really kind mom offered us a band-aid and she did so in French, and it was just so awesome to go from being the only person speaking this language to suddenly be surrounded by it. It was like the next best thing to actually going and traveling, only it felt a lot more hospitable because I knew that, you know, if I didn't know a word, I was in an English language context and I could still speak English if I had to. So I really felt like for the longest time, we were just like swimming in this endless ocean on a raft, looking for relief. And finally arriving at the Saturday school, I felt like we finally got to put our feet on solid ground for the first time, and I just felt so relieved when that happened. I know that when a lot of people decide to raise their children bilingually in a non-native language, they feel the burden so heavy on their shoulders and they feel like they have to be prepared to raise their kid all 18 years in French. And I don't subscribe to that at all. You can do it, but you can't do it alone. And my theory is that you just have to be the bridge. You have to take them just as far as the point where they can meet other native speakers and go farther with them. I was also really surprised at how much diversity I saw in the people who were around me. I thought for sure I would be the only non-native speaker, but after walking around for a while, I saw all kinds of arrangements. I saw parents speaking English to their kids who sounded to me like Americans, or at least who had been in America for a long time. And I saw grandparents bringing their grandkids, and I even personally met another parent who was doing what we were doing. It was just really neat to see how many different scenarios there were. Also, like, everyone wasn't from France. Like, there were people from French Africa, there were people from Asia, from all sorts of like racial and cultural backgrounds too. It just made me feel even more at home than if I were to like say go abroad, where I would be like maybe the only American, maybe the only non-native speaker of that language. One thing I really wondered when I was there was how well does this actually compare to sending my child in to a French preschool. Like if we were to go to France, for example, and I could register them in school and stay there for like a couple months, would it even be necessary if I were to do this? In these situations where the minority language is being taught, often the kids will use the majority language, in our case English, as a lingua franca among them. The teacher will speak French, but then among themselves they'll speak English. So I kind of wondered what the dynamic is in the class. Like, I wasn't allowed to like sit in and listen, but I was just kind of curious about that. I also felt like kind of disappointed in myself, especially at the beginning. I was really shy about meeting other parents who were like waiting for the class to start. I think I was nervous because a lot of them were native French speakers, and I was just like worried if I speak French to them, will I make mistakes? So that's totally normal, and I really like regret looking back on that moment, wishing that I just been brave and spoke a little bit more. And then lastly, the other thing that I noticed about the French school is that it kind of gave me a glimpse into the French school system. My son is already in preschool, in American preschool, but Spanish immersion preschool. I just noticed some differences. Like, it just seemed like the French Saturday school was a lot more like scholarly and academic, and maybe even a little bit more strict than the preschool approach, probably because in France kids actually do start school at age 3, so there really is this emphasis on like achievement and rules and regulations and those sorts of things that is kind of absent from preschool. So I just thought that was really interesting. Like, for example, when my son was acting up one day, he actually got sent to the corner, and I know in American schools, like, I don't think they use the corner very much anymore. It just, to us, kind of seems like a very old like discipline system. So I'm not sure if that's just the way things are in France, or if it's just because it's like an academic atmosphere. I'm not really sure. Also, to just understand more about their academic system, the writing, like they do cursive right away, the notebooks, the workbooks, like it was just really cool. I felt like I had a direct window into if you were to be going to school in France, and I thought that was just really awesome. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about why we decided to leave this wonderful French Saturday school. The reason why we ended up switching out of the school is actually because my son had some behavior problems. I don't know if he was just not mature enough for this school at this time, or because the school was from 10 to 1, which basically coincided with his snack time, his lunchtime, and the beginning of his nap time. But for whatever reason, he was just having a really hard time sitting down and listening to the teacher and obeying the teacher when she would have him sit down and do activities. So I'm not really sure if this is indicative of another problem, but for whatever reason, he was just really getting in trouble all the time for not following directions. And this was also leading to him being sent to the corner, being sent to other classrooms, and then being sent to the principal's office ultimately for like more than 1 week. I think it was like 2 or 3 weeks. And he really started dreading going. He never wanted to get in the car to go. He just seemed really like upset after class was over, and it just started becoming a huge source of anxiety and sadness for me, because I really truly wanted him to have a positive experience in French, like more than anything. And I realized, like, I just had to step back and realize that it wasn't really a positive experience for anyone, especially him. I eventually became the only person who was really trying to like force him to go to this. Like, it was clear that he didn't want to go. It was clear that the teachers didn't want him to come because he was distracting the other children and they couldn't learn in the way that, you know, all the parents want them to learn. The time is limited, and the quality of that interaction really has to happen in a short amount of time. It was a decision that was difficult to make, but ultimately it came down to having me as the only French speaker. The other people in his life that spoke French, I really, really want it to be a positive experience. I didn't want him to develop negative feelings surrounding the French language, surrounding people who spoke French, or even the culture of France. So I just decided to pull him out, work on his following directions and behavior for another year, and then register him next year, hopefully, where he's having a little less trouble squirming around in class, sitting down in his seat and following directions. I really, really love this as a tool for supporting parents, especially those who are raising their children as non-native speakers, because I think the classes are all taught by native speakers. And it's just a wonderful, wonderful opportunity and experience. And I'm really bummed that we couldn't continue, but trust me, like, I have my eyes on next year or maybe the following year to try again, just because I thought it was a perfect fit for our situation, because we speak French all the time at home. And I don't really think that we need like a French immersion situation. I think that just a little bit of French injected every Saturday, or, you know, once or twice a week, would be enough. When we couple that with like the TV time being in French and a lot of songs being in French, books in French, I think that it was actually a really great fit for us. But unfortunately it didn't work out. So if you have experience with a Saturday school or heritage school, let me know. How did it go for you? How old was your child when they went? And what did you notice? I would love to hear about that, so please leave me a comment below. All right, well, thank you so much for listening all the way to the end of this video. I love speaking to you guys, and I hope that my video gave you a little bit of information and also inspired you to try out this really great option if you have the opportunity. All right, thank you so much for listening, and I will see you in the next video.